Welcome, everyone, to another segment of Chief Speaks on Enlightenment and Transformation. I'm Chief Yuya, and as always, I like to welcome everyone, and in particular, those of you listening from the archives and those of you listening in from YouTube and Blog Talk and iTunes and Mixcloud as well. I know we have some Mixcloud folks in there. However you're getting here, and for whatever reason you're getting here, I just want to welcome you, of course. And this month we've been dealing with the topic of, we started our topic of living the culture. And, of course, this being the 12th Gregorian month in the Gregorian year of 2016, we're doing a bit of a culmination of topics and ideas in order for us to kind of just spread out what was behind us for this year, the topics that we discussed, and what does it mean now going forward. And obviously, when you take the topics of the past 11 months, and you put them together, you definitely have a culture that's laid out in front of you. And of course, with the addendum of the 14 Keys book that was released not long ago, you have pretty much the framework and skeleton for claiming a cultural connection and a cultural attachment. And I want to make a couple of notes before we kind of get into this. This is not for everyone, and I understand that, and I think everyone who does work with Anu understands that as well. So we're not speaking in terms of absolutism, and it has to be this way or it won't work, because different things will work for different people, but we certainly don't want to get in the way of those who are learning something that does work for them. And is making them not only better people, but is making them people who are more fulfilled within themselves and moving closer to their purpose and their whole meaning and reason for walking and living in this realm. So based on that, I just wanted to share that again. These are our new calculations, and though you may hear us pull from different bodies of work at time extraneous to the Yanu construct, it's not because we're using those to validate anything, but just because sometimes people are a bit more familiar, and there is wisdom that can be found in so many different places, and it's just for the purposes of explaining things to other folk. All right. And I felt I wanted to share that because I had a conversation with Kim from Community Radio recently, and she expressed her fed upness with some of the rudeness of the responses and comments that have come across some of the shows she's done, and has expressed her lack of desire to continue to do segments that people are not really critically looking at and just using as a way to make anyone who's involved with the segments a whipping post. And, I agree, one of the reasons why women shouldn't be out front, you don't want them to be whipped on and everything. I can take it. People will say things about me, but I'm built for that, so, and I'm built to also shut that game down very quickly without getting emotional. Women are the embodiment of emotionalism. So they're going to take things a little bit different. They're going to absorb things in a certain way, as they should. That's not a default. A defect. That's a good thing. Whereas men are a bit more directed. So when they say something and something is said back, they keep pushing through to their direction, as opposed to pausing for a moment, absorbing that energy that's being sent to them and trying to process it. Okay. So, I wanted to just share that kind of going forward in terms of like some of the information that's being shared with you all and the reasoning. And, it's been good because I've noticed some of the students stepping up to correct folks with some of their out of pocketness and their out of lineness. And, one of the interesting things that I've noticed, and I'm sure many of you have as well, you'll get someone who will say something extremely rude in a video, right? Or as a comment to a video. And you notice how you know within yourself that if you responded to them in like manner, that it would go absolutely nowhere. And in fact, that may be what they're calling for, because they're just frustrated and want somebody to fight with. But if you notice, if someone says something rude to you and then you respond with intellectualism and compassion and patience, they tend to come back rude again. And in many instances in the sickened American culture, you're not able to respond in kind. If someone says something rude, you can't say, you know what, go F yourself. You know, or who the F you talking to, go to hell, whatever it is you might say, right? You have to say, well, listen, if you understand what's being said, da, 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 da. And sometimes we lose sight. And again, I'm very appreciative of what the students are doing. But there goes my phone. Let me turn that phone down a second. You know, never lose sight that a lot of times you're dealing with savage and wild, bestial people. They have no sense of protocol, etiquette, right from wrong, emotional, intellectual, or spiritual integrity. And they may not want it. Again, when you're communicating with people on the internet, you really do not know who you're talking to. So you could be speaking to someone who just likes to make trouble. You know, someone who just likes to cause problems on the internet. That's how they get their kicks. So you want to be careful with, as we say, how many pearls that you cast to swine. And sometimes you got to be able to pick up on the vibration. And that always also, for those who are stuck in that zone, it gives them an opportunity to raise up. You know, when you say, listen, until you can talk like you got some sense, we have nothing to talk about. Then they might say, well, hey, what am I doing? And they might seriously ask someone, am I coming off rude? Am I this and that? Or am I rude? You know, because sometimes people use that coming off as a deflection tactic. Oh, I didn't mean to come off that way. You are that way. I didn't mean to seem like an asshole. You know, you're an asshole. Excuse my Swahili. You know, and sometimes people don't want to face and own how they're moving through the world and what they're moving through the world as. They want to play those games. So I'm just saying that for all of the students, you know, because it can get very frustrating, and I don't want you to get frustrated. You got to say what you need to say, and if the person receives it, fine. If not, keep it moving. You know, because there are many forms of agents, and sometimes you can be an agent against yourself by egoically trying to prove something to someone who's a 10%er. I mean, they already know what you're saying, just laughing at you. And I've seen that. You know, I've seen that in some of the comments. People are just toying with other people. They're just having fun with them. And you're sitting here and giving your all and giving examples and putting links to other videos and books, and they're not interested. You know, so you don't want to get wrapped up into too much of that. But again, I commend those students who did step forward and correct some of the tomfoolery, because it is beneath this entire movement. It is really beneath it. And the only way that you can show it is by behaving in a royal manner that is beyond the nonsense. And one bit of guidance I would share with you is that just because someone disagrees with you doesn't mean that they're attacking your character. You know, a lot of times people take things a bit too personal in that sense, and that's because they're not speaking from a place of knowing, they're speaking from a place of feeling. You know, so it becomes very personal to them, whatever it is that they're saying. And the same thing goes for me. I don't care if people agree or disagree with whatever I'm saying. I'm just here doing what I was called to do. And if you disagree with me, I don't consider it a personal attack on my character. And primarily because no one really knows me. So you may get an impression or get a vibe and get a feeling, and that's cool. But in reality, you don't know me. You know, and I don't know you. So what we're doing is we're putting avatars of ideas out, and they can debate with one another. I'm not going to debate with you unless you're my equal. And I'm very clear on that with you all. Now, if you guys want to go back and forth within the comments because you're all students at a similar level, at a similar grade, go at it. Have fun. I don't have time for that because I'm busy doing things that's moving and driving a movement forward. So I don't have time to debate with someone who just came into consciousness 2 years ago, or who even came in 10 years ago but still doesn't know what the heck they're doing, or 20 years ago, or just someone who's just not on my level. And there are levels. Like Meek Mill says, there's levels to this thing. And I've said that before, but I know people have a lot of issue with that because they assume that immediately as a statement of arrogance. But all societies are based around a hierarchy. There's a place for everyone. And that's not something that if you have to explain that more than once, then you're in the wrong place. If people can't really see you, if people can't really respect you. So I'm saying that even for the comments, if you have to keep going back and forth with a person, stop. Just give them, they may be in kindergarten. And, I've been doing this for a very long time. And what I mean by this, when I say doing this, I've been in this way of learning. And I've sat under literally hundreds of people through speeches and workshops and bill ciphers, so forth and so on. So when I say this, I'm saying I've been a student for a very long time, not just a teacher, but a student. And I can tell you, listen, just trust me on this one. There's always going to be those in the audience or in the crowd who don't get it. There's always going to be that one who's maybe slow or too slow to get it, or just, out of place. And, they're not going to understand what you're talking about. You're not going to be able to convince everyone of your perspective. And I'm not saying convince, like get them to agree with you, but not everyone's even going to be able to see what you're seeing, no matter how hard you teach. I know that. There's things that I teach and I break it down as simple as it possibly can be. And there's always going to be one in there who doesn't get it. And the problem is, in our society, when people don't get things a lot of times and they have to be vulnerable, they use sarcasm, which is a form of anger, as a means to mask their ignorance. Instead of just saying, listen, I'm ignorant, I don't get it, I'm trying to follow, I'm just not picking up what you're saying. And then you might have to say, listen, then what I'm saying is not for you. Let's bring you back. Let's go back a couple of steps, because maybe we missed some steps in there, and there's some other stuff that you need to learn first before you can get to what I'm talking about, no matter how simple it may be. You have some people who are in these study groups and whatnot, and they don't read very well. You have other people who are debating and things like that, and they don't listen very well. You have others who are debating, they don't speak very well. So, some people have poor reading comprehension, or just poor reading skills, poor listening comprehension, and poor articulation. So it becomes a very frustrating experience for an individual like that if you're speaking over their heads. And there's always going to be somebody you're going to speak over their head. Trust me. Always. You can't get away from that. You're going to speak over somebody's head in every moment, in every venue. And I've spoken in front of 3-4 people, and I've spoken in front of 3,000-4,000 people. And regardless of the ratio, there's always going to be somebody, you just do the ratios, who doesn't get what you're saying. And they got the confused look, and they're just like, I don't know, this is all flying over my head, no matter how simple you put it. Because a lot of times it's vibratory. And certain vibrations will speak to certain people in certain ways. And then some people are just, possessed. They're spiritually possessed by oppressive spirits that block their understanding, that keep a cloud and a haze from them being able to downcode light transmissions. So a lot of times there's so many different things going on that you have to take those things into account before you start name calling and arguing with each other and everything like that, like I've been seeing on the threads. And I know, again, like I said, I know it gets frustrating on both sides sometimes, but there's reasons, and you got to look for the reasons behind things. And of course, anything that I'm bringing up obviously is always going to be related to the topic, and there's always an intertwining and a concordance that happens between different subjects and topics that we may discuss, because ultimately all of these things are interconnected, and that's what creates a tight bond between the different concepts that prevents infiltration. Just like if you read the 14 Keys, you'll notice that some principles almost seem to like overlap one another, and they create like a snake-like, serpent-like interweaving between one another, So whether we're talking about the conflicts of people who disagree and not really being able to see each other, and, sometimes putting a little bit too much value on what certain people are saying, or if we're just talking about living the culture, or in culture, again, it's the cultivation, and living a life where we're constantly cultivating the mind, because culture creates a mind within a person, so it takes us again to the power of thought, and how thought controls, and how thought cultivates what a person is going to be. And a lot of times what you find in those discussions and disagreements is that you can see sometimes when people are arguing, like on YouTube, one person is thinking, the other person is not. And you can see it clear as day. A lot of times what you witness is one individual is giving maybe collected social facts, or you see that there's a lot of thought behind what they're saying, that they actually have a structure to what it is that they're saying. Then some people are just reactionary. Some just like to hold their ground and keep an argument going. And a lot of times what you're seeing when it comes to these subjects, especially the subjects that exist surrounding male and female relationships, most of it is anecdotal. So it's just people are pretty much projecting and really representing their own personal experience and superimposing that on the entire narrative. You see, so they're relating that to anything that's said. And the truth is, you can't have a conversation with a person like that. It's basically a waste of time, because anything that they say is going to be based on personal observation, and they may be working with a very narrow field of vision, very narrow field of wisdom. And if you start to introduce new information, they'll look at the information outside of their current field and scope of vision as being the disagreement, as being the invader, the intrusion. And see, that's really the opposite of what culture is supposed to do, because when you're dealing with the power of culture, again, you're dealing with knowledge. Knowledge is what we utilize. It's like, because you're looking at culture and you're looking at like a farming scenario where seeds are planted. Well, what are they seeds of? Seeds of knowledge. And then we cultivate those seeds of knowledge in order to gain control of not only ourselves, but our different ecosystems, our homesteads, our economy. You see, and without that culture, there is no control of economy, because like I said in the 14 Keys, economy is the management of the house, or the management of life. So if you're unable to control your economy, in effect, you're not controlling your life. So there's a direct correlation between the type of individuals who are arguing about certain things and the lives that they live. And you can see it. And again, it's not to put anyone down, because like when we say Americanized, like that's another thing that I noticed in a lot of those comments. We're specifically speaking about a process in all of these shows. We'll say the Americanized black woman, the Americanized black female, the Americanized black male. There's a distinction between that than when we say a melanin dominant man, a melanin dominant woman, or an African woman, African man. And in individuals, because a lot of times they have really poor listening skills, they'll say, so you saying all black women or all black men? No one has said that. So now we have to expend another 45 minutes trying to get you calm enough and to suppress the feelings that we have based on your initial rudeness to explain to you that we're speaking about a fabricated and produced being that Western society has created as a part of a tool to destroy and to disenfranchise a group of people. You see, so if you're really thinking, see what knowledge really does when it's introduced into your life, and the way you really determine what knowledge does is you can determine it by its ability to purify. Okay, so knowledge is really a purifier, like light. Light can purify things. If you put certain organisms in the light, they'll die out. Okay, so your knowledge is a purifier of your life. And a lot of times when you see individuals who profess to know certain things, but still wrapped in the same circles and fighting to stay wrapped in the same circles, yelling and screaming and being rude, they have not introduced any real knowledge into their lives because it hasn't purified those layers of ego so they could actually get to their soul. Because not only does knowledge purify one's life, but it also ennobles the life. You know, so if you have a student who is really looking to apply the theories and the knowledge that they've acquired in their path, it's going to evolve their character, you know, and a lot of times it may evolve their character into a form where they want to start to help individuals in the world and start to deliver unconditional service. But that then engenders an emotion. So when your knowledge begins to purify your world, and this is all cultivation, this is all culture. So sometimes people don't really know what culture is. So they'll say, like I saw one comment where someone was like, it's not really even about culture, it's about this. But they didn't understand that culture is a container for so many other things. You see, so it is about the culture, because the culture are the tools that are used to cultivate thought or to cultivate the mind. And the mind is used to control thought. And when thought is controlled, then thought is able to ennoble and purify life. And if you think about it, that purification process is the process of returning to the source of where we come from, the source of what, but we return now after going through that purification process that happens through knowledge. You even look at certain zodiacal archetypes. You look at the Aquarian archetype. There's a pouring out of water. Water represents what? Consciousness, right? But through that consciousness and that knowledge, there is a purification that happens, just like rainwater. When you use rainwater in your rituals, one of the primary reasons that we use rainwater is because rainwater purifies. It's different than river water or creek water or ocean water, seawater. I wanted to say salt water, but ocean water or seawater. And you also have saltwater rivers as well. So it's different. Rainwater has a different specific purpose. Why? Because that purification is coming from the sky. Well, what does the north represent in our spirituality? The north represents knowledge. You see, so when you have rain coming from the sky, from the sky, you have liquefied knowledge. And when that liquefied knowledge pours over you, it ennobles you and it purifies you. You see, so when people are afraid to be rained down upon with knowledge, what it is that they're trying to stay dirty. They're trying to stay dusty and filthy, so that way there's no emotional compulsion later to live righteously, because that's the process. Remember, it's spirit, thought, emotion. And even though emotions are spirit, because the truth is spirit is really the vein that travels through all of it, because the spirit will travel through thought, the spirit will travel through emotion, the spirit will travel through the body. So it's kind of like that vein that animates everything. You know, like when we say, well, something has been spirited, or you've been spirited away, you know, which by the way is a really good side note, because I know I gave what was it? The book, The Forest of a Thousand Demons, and some of the students had reached out to me and said that they, after listening to the show, they got a copy of it, and they really, really appreciated that book. I told you the book is awesome. Well, I just said another phrase, and it made me think of another one that you guys may want to check out. And some of you may have already seen it. Really good little movie. It's old now, so you probably can get it on YouTube or something like that. I'm guessing. Matter of fact, I'm looking at the DVD now. I need to get rid of this DVD. I got all these old DVDs. I'm building a library. Or not building a library, taking my old books and DVDs. Cause a lot of times when I go to the continent, I bring them because, over there in many places there's no books. The only book you can get is the Bible, and you can get like the little Nollywood DVDs and stuff. But what they really like over there are American DVDs, and it's not just so much for the culture. Even Spanish DVDs they watch a lot over there, but it's because they can learn the language through the subtitles, so they use it as a teaching mechanism. But anyway, because I'm really diverging, but yeah, there's a movie, Spirited Away. I had just said Spirit Away when I was talking about spirit. That's another good one if you guys want to check out. Another recommendation from me. Spirited Away is a nice one. It was done by Hayao Miyazaki, and it was done I think around 2000, maybe like between like 99 and 2000. And I think it was 2000 2001, somewhere around there. So it's got some age on it, but definitely I think one that if you guys check out, you'll definitely enjoy it. It's kind of on the level, Forest of a Thousand Demons. I think you would really get a lot out of it. So anyway, I was speaking about the order of things and how a lot of times individuals will avoid that knowledge because they don't want the compulsion or the impelling of living a righteous life. Okay. Because intellect doesn't necessarily illuminate the path to conduct, but what intellect does is intellect can be so problematic all the times because it's the road that you have to go down in order to get to the real knowledge, and your intellect can be a blocker. That's why Eshu governs the realm of intellect, because he's the gateway. You see, so it is your wit and your intellect that can either take you to the next level, or it can keep you where you're at. It can keep you in a stagnated space. So it's like, which, I mean, we're really talking about sometimes the blindness of ego, and a lot of times in mythology, when you see the blind, sometimes it's speaking about those who have another kind of vision, but it's speaking about those who have fallen into what they say, the pit of ego, or the pit of darkness. Whenever you read things like that, where it says someone has fallen to a pit, it's speaking about someone who are kind of living a life of ignorance that is now turned into a life of wickedness. Okay, remember, wickedness is to go against nature. Okay, so wickedness is not the same as being evil. Evil is cool. Evil's fine. Evil's not really so much the issue. Some people just evil. Just like sometimes we get animals for their evilness. You want a guard dog. You want an evil, vicious guard dog. Even years me being in athletics, especially the fighting arenas, I usually looked for fighters who were evil. I like mean fighters. There's a place for that meanness, and obviously there's a place for that compassion. So that meanness or that evilness, and evil is really, you're talking about black women, but that evilness is not the same as wickedness. Okay, and the wickedness comes as a result of staying in that space where you're not allowing the reign of knowledge, which causes you to form back into a unified. It forms you into a unified existence. It causes you to form back into unity. But when you stay in that space, especially when you kind of want to privatize your intellectualism, which a lot of people do because they don't want it to be challenged in the face of knowledge, your own personal intellectualism, it takes you from unity into separatism. Okay. And when you come back into a space of real knowledge, that separatism begins to diminish. It begins to disintegrate. And what's restored is peace. Okay. Because you're able to really see your identity a bit more properly, your spiritual identity. So when we're dealing with cultivation, and that's what we're still talking about here, the power of culture or the power of cultivation. What we're speaking about is the knowledge that comes through that, again, enables and ennobles and purifies a life path for an individual. So I know a lot of times when we're speaking about culture and living the culture, we're talking about ethnicity and really ethnic values or socio-geographic values and aesthetics and how we eat and how we dress and how we speak and the languages we use. And all of those are tools of culture. The way you drink, the way you eat, the way you speak, the way you walk, so forth and so on, these are tools, but sometimes, unfortunately, we confuse ourselves, the one who is perceiving thought with the one who is knowing. And we get confused, and it's very simple. It's very similar to this. It's like it's like a musician. It's like a piano player identifying themselves with their piano. That's the same way when we identify ourselves with our intellect. We forget sometimes that our intellect is a tool that's used to cultivate us. It's a gateway tool. And even in our knowing. So sometimes we make our intellect the destination, which of course creates the more illusion of ego, because everyone knows more than everyone else. And I know this and I know that. And the mind, what sits above that, the mind is the one that says that again perceives. So again, it's that dualistic nature that we have to encapsulate that lies between the knower and the one that is perceiving the knowing. And the mind becomes the destroyer of things that are real. Okay. And that's very important because things that are real are usually guided to us by our intellect. And that's why when you look at the comments and things like that, you see these references to this facts and this person gave this video, this person said that video. So the more extraneous objects and elements that we can utilize to support what it is where we think our intellect wants to land, the more real it becomes to us. So we might say, well, we'll start using statistics. Well, 70% of the people did this and 80% of the people did that. And I'm not saying that I've never used statistics before. So I want you to understand, again, there's a dualistic nature there. But what the mind does is the mind becomes indifferent to those. Your real mind is indifferent to the objects of perception. And when you become an adherent or a student of this way, a student of this culture of creation or this culture of right creation and pure creation, extracting yourself from the creation of illusion, then you have to seek out that higher mind in order to destroy the things that you've considered to be real. But the mind itself is not the knower. Okay. And the mind should always be distinguished from the knower. There's a difference. So the knower or the knowledge is the one, because knowledge changes, knowledge expands, and knowledge is brought back to the mind for processing. Okay. So all of these different tools that we're talking about in terms of the things that we're arguing about and these comments and threads, and I say we, even though I haven't gotten up there and I hadn't said anything, but I've seen some of them, and I don't read all of them because it's some of it has nothing to do with the videos. Like some of them I can tell that people haven't even watched the videos. They're just having fun. They're looking at titles and just going off. And again, that's because they're stuck in intellectualism. They're stuck in what they think that they know, but they're not processing anything with the objectivity of the mind. and the mind is allowed to give rise to some of these truths because of its dualistic nature. And the mind kind of gives you a space where you can work with fine matter, as we call it in our metaphysics. And your fine matter is like the causal realm, and I spoke about that, the different dimensions of manifestation for the magician. You have the causal body, you have the abstract mind, and you have the coarser matter. So you have fine matter, and then you have what's called coarser matter. So like in your mental realm or your concrete self, you'd have coarser matter. And coarse, as many of you know, is just like sandpaper or salt. You have bigger pieces, and then you have finer, smaller pieces, right? So that would be more your causal space. And it really goes down to the atomic matter of your own aspect of yourself. But the point I'm saying, to really try to simplify it even more, culture, or what we perceive as the containers of culture, when we're developing our thought and when we're developing our mind, these are all tools. And we shouldn't be identifying them with them so strongly that we lose the intent of why they exist to begin with. So again, it's like I said, I think I used the example of a piano player who identifies his or herself with his or her piano, or the painter who identifies themselves with their paintbrush. You see, they're losing the ultimate point. You see, so even in this knowing, and even in the cultivation of a mind, when you begin to identify yourself with your intellect, you lose the ultimate point. Okay, you lose the ultimate mission. It's not about your intellect. It's not even about what you know. Because again, there's a separation. There has to be a dualistic separation from the coarser material and the finer material. And one is going to be related more to what you think you know. One is going to be related to your intellect. And one is going to be related to the higher level causes that then trickle down into your more coarser or more concrete experiences or more concrete aspects. So to make it more clear, again, because I'm gonna break, because again, this conversation around cultivation or culture, there's so many confusing ideas that people are putting out there, and it's because I tell you, that's why in our last segment, I gave and offered and read the definition of culture for you all, because so many people they use words, they don't even know what they mean, and then they fall into this, well, it means this for me. Then you need to give that lexicon before you start speaking to people. Say, listen, I'm going to use this word and it seems like I'm speaking English, but I'm really not. I'm just using the same sounds of English, but I have my own definitions applied to them. To not do that would be like a lawyer using legalese to purposely deceive and confuse their clients. That's pretty wicked. But anyway, so let's break it down again, looking at our Yorubic aspects. You have the Ori Ode and you have the Ori Inu, right? And the Ori Ode, anytime you see Ode by itself just means outer. So sometimes you'll even see in our culture, you'll see Eshu Ode, or Iyalode. Okay, Eshu Ode just means Eshu outside. So a lot of times when we do our spiritual work, we have certain entities or shrines or Eshu that we'll leave outside, maybe on our front steps, maybe on the front of our yard, however your setup is. But the ultimate purpose is that this goes outside. And then you have the Inu, I-N-U, Inu, very similar to Anu. And Inu means inner. Okay, so like we'll say Ori Inu, which is my inner head or my inner consciousness. And my Ori Ode is my outer consciousness. Okay, my Eshu Inu is the Eshu that goes inside. The Eshu Ode is the one that goes outside. And a lot of times we look at that because of how we tend to practice our spirituality. Like the Eshu Inu will go inside of the house. The Eshu Ode will go outside of the house. But typically in our culture, the Eshu Inu goes inside of the outside shrine. And the Eshu Ode will go outside of the outside shrine, because we don't always have our shrines in our houses like we have here. Usually they're outside, they're in the yard or in the compound somewhere. There's a whole separate building. But I wanted to, again, discuss and get into that whole inner and outer aspect for a second, for you to really understand what that means in regards to our search and our movements towards culture. Well, like I told you before, your mind is dualistic in nature, and this is where you get the difference between the mind and the thought. The finer aspect of the mind is the mind, and the more coarser aspect condenses itself down into the more gross matter thought. Okay, and you need them. You can't cast aside or do away with the thought, or you can't even cast aside and do away with intellectualism, just like you can't cast aside and do away with the ego, regardless of what your new age teacher is telling you. Now, you don't have to listen to me and to believe me, but if you don't believe me today, you'll believe me tomorrow. You'll figure it out. All of these components are used for specific reasons. So you have, like, again, your outer head and you have your inner head. Both are necessary for the cultivation of the individual, or the cultivation of the character. Well, what is the purpose of the outer head? The outer head is similar to like a okay, here, I don't want to use that example. Okay, so we'll say okay, here's one. When I used to own my barbershop, I started, now this is back in the days, of course, a long time back in the days. So at one point, people don't talk about it that much anymore, but HIV used to be the big thing, right? That was what everybody was terrified of, years ago. And I remember cutting hair, because, when you're cutting hair, you're getting very intimate. People are bleeding. You're shaving them, especially if you're using a straight razor. But even if you're using clippers, and then a lot of times when you're done with the cut, you may take some alcohol or some aftershave. You put it in your hands and you put it on their face. You see? So there's a lot of risk of things. And also when you cut hair, you tend to get tiny little micro cuts from the hair that you're cutting, which is really, hair splinters are very annoying to get out. Anyone who's ever cut hair, you know what I'm talking about. So I remember at a time, I'm like, this is one of the reasons, one of the micro reasons. It wasn't the main reasons, but one of the supporting reasons that eventually led me out of that profession. Because I started contemplating cutting hair with gloves on, with rubber gloves. And I tried it a couple of times. And I mean, obviously not only was it like really hot, I'm like, man, because the clippers get hot and now my hands are sweating. But I didn't have the tactile, feel that I had previously. Now, wearing the gloves protects me and protects my hands, my hands are the whole magic. That's was giving you the cut, man. Without those, I got to look for another profession to get into. So the star of the show was my hands, but I had to mask and cover the hands for my and their own protection. Okay. So that way I could continue to cultivate the skill and continue to use that tool. Right. So that eventually, not that, but that was one of the reasons why I was like, what, I think I'm also going to get out of the hair thing, man. Cause people have a lot of things a lot of times, but anyway, and that's a small reason, but I wanted to just give the idea and the example of something that covers something that's more potent, but it loses its potency and its power because of its covering. Well, that's the same thing, the interaction between your mind and your thoughts. So your thoughts are related to your ori ode, or your outer head, and your mind, or the knowing, is related closer to your inner consciousness, your ori inu. But the outer head, which often we'll say is the physical head, But again, what does that mean? Like your skull. A skull, what does what? It protects the brain, because you have layers of outer and inner. Inner to the skull would be the brain. Well, what does the skull do? It protects the brain from harm. But also possibly we lose some of the potency of what the brain would be, because the brain is not really interacting with the environment in the same way, especially if you have processed hair, let's say, and you're blocking some of your neurotransmitters. So we start to see the value of the thought, but also the danger of the thought and how it really blocks the potency of knowing. You see, and a lot of times, because we don't respect the dualistic nature of the brain thought, or just the dualistic nature of self, we will thicken the covering that's over the potent thing. We'll thicken and thicken and thicken and thicken and thicken. And what happens is that when we put that mind on and when we put that intellect on and we function solely through the purposes and the lens of our intellect, we lose the potency of our knowing. Because again, remember, they're not the same thing. And then we're only able at that point to process gross matter concepts. So very similar to if you try to, let's say, try to wash your hair. Here's a good one. For those of you with hair, try to wash your hair with construction gloves on. Right? Can you really, you might pull all your hair out, but can you really massage your roots and, massage certain points, massage, the point where the base of your skull touches the top of your spine and, really get into dealing with your follicles and your roots? No, you can only pretty much just grossly rub the top of your head because you've lost a lot of your tactile control. Okay. So when we are wrapped up in the whirlwind and that heaviness of thought, we lose our ability to understand the finer and more subtle concepts and elements of life, because we can now only deal with the gross, heavy impact ideas of life. So if someone says something to us like, well, men and women, we immediately go to a more grosser and heavier idea, because we're not allowing the potency of the mind to get through, because we've only identified with the covering. We've identified with the glove, you see, or we've identified with the bodysuit. Let's say we're wearing a bodysuit to protect ourselves from the elements, and we're forgetting that the processing happens with that which is inside, not with that which is outside, because that which is outside is actually dead. So we lose our delicacy of feeling. We lose our ability to pick up small things. Like when you have gloves on, you can't pick up a needle. You can't pick up small objects. So a lot of times it's the smaller things that result in the modification of our thinking. You see, because our thoughts are comprised of our history, and that's constantly being modified by what we're presently going through. Okay. And there are certain capacities and there are certain strengths that the mind has within it that gets blocked by our identifying with the strengths and the weakness and the incapacities of thought. And this all blocks the cult, because remember, ultimately, we're cultivating the mind. That's what mythology and culture and all of these different things do. They're cultivating and purifying the mind so that life can be purified. Now, what do I mean by life be purified? Your life? No. Life in general. Remember, life is an absolute source. So you don't own life. I don't own life. Just like the air inside of my body, when I expire, what happens? Bah! The air goes back out. I don't get to keep it and take it to the duat with me. I don't get to keep it and take it to the underworld with me, or wherever it is I'm going next. I don't get that air. The air stays here. But hopefully it's made better by the cultivation of myself. So the air that's inside of me and that funnels through me, it goes through my system and it goes through my filters, and it becomes some of the identity that you may know as Chief Yuya for a moment. And then when it goes back into the environment, the next person breathes it in. And then they get some of that value, and it goes on and goes on and goes on to the quality of life elevates. And again, I'm associating, just for the ability of really of understanding, I'm associating the transcending nature or the effort to increase the quality of life with breath. Okay. Or emi, as we call it, which is divine breath. Okay. And that is raised and that is elevated through our own personal and group cultivation, because true personal cultivation is personal purification. Okay, that's what happens when you're cultivating yourself, and that's why sometimes you see individuals who are going through high cultural experiences. There is a level of piety that steps in, that creeps in, but it's pure and authentic piety. It's not self-righteousness. Okay, it's really, individuals begin to become more like Obatala, where they may not use as much profanity. They may not argue as much. They may not even party as much. They may not get as excited as much. They may be a little bit more even killed because they're becoming purified from all the layers and the histories that are surrounding their true selves. Just like rain would do, it washes away the dirt. Well, the rain of knowledge washes away the layers. It washes off the glove that you had to use in order to protect the true self. Okay? Rain, just like when we do an Ori cleanse, what are we doing? We're washing away the layers that are blocking the Ori Inu, that are blocking the true mind. So we use certain herbs and we use certain rituals and incantations, and we're simultaneously doing and instantaneously doing, we're cleansing the individual, the auric body, but we're also cleansing the layers that have built up around the mind as a false sense of protection. Okay, which of course just represents vibratory illusion. You see, so this is a process. This is culture. This is a process of culture. Now, everything that exists within your quote unquote external world, because you got to just know that the influence of thought is a medium by which the knower or the mind views its external world, and it's very similar to the influence that stained glass has on objects that are seen through it, right? So that's why a lot of times when you bring up these conversations or these shows, individuals are seeing through that stain of the mind, that stain of thought, that stain of the brain, and they may be, and they usually are, they're unconscious of the influence of thought, and really, to many degrees, they're supposed to be unconscious of the influence of thought. Okay, so there's supposed to be an automatic cultural cultivation that happens in order to keep that person moving beyond the creator of illusion. And what is the creative illusion? Thought. Okay, so it gets a little tricky when people don't realize that every aspect of your experiences, of your history, of the things that appear in your realities, whether they be the shadows or whether they be the things that exist in the light, whether it be the phenomenon and all different vibrations, they are constantly modifying the brain. So when we say, well, the answer is culture, because your culture will modify the brain, which will either purify the mind and transcend and elevate the level of life, or will keep it down in a stagnant dark pit where you're running around in circles of wickedness. So does what you eat matter? Yes. Does what you see matter? Yes. Does the music you listen to matter? Yes. Does the language that you speak matter? Yes. Do the clothes that you wear matter? Yes, because all of these things are creating a history for you, which are having an influence on thought, which can either block off the cultivation, because remember, they can either create thicker layers of that glove or thicker layers of that thought or that brain, or they can thin out the layers. You can have experiences within your culture, and you find this in many cultures where there's a constant humbling. Look at Asian culture, all that bowing that they do every every 5 seconds. There's a lot of bowing. And, as a martial scientist, and I've learned, like when we're getting ready to fight, what the bowing represents, it's a sign of respect, and we might even say us, and then we bow. But what it is that I see my body as a weapon, or my body is a weapon, and I'm breaking it. It's like breaking a sword. Okay, so if you're doing that consistently, I may work out, I may fight, I may have, broken some jaws, knocked some people out. So I'm walking out every day with construction gloves in my back pocket. Like, I'm a scrapper. I'm ready for what happens next. And that constant humbling reminds me that I'm something else. So I never really get an opportunity to identify too heavy with the layer. You see, that's not what's being cultivated in me. What's being cultivated is breaking through the layers and bowing to a space of purity, to a space of vulnerability to what I really and truly am. You see, now look within your culture and look and see how many experiences of intentional humility exist within that culture. And I know some of you listening may be Christians or Muslims, and you may have opportunities where you get down on your knees and you pray to what you perceive to be a higher power or whatever, and that keeps you humble. Okay, well, whatever works for you, but for anyone listening and for everyone listening, give careful attention to the amount of superficial and obvious sense that the mind is being exposed to by illusion. And pay close attention in your world and in your daily habits and just your daily vibratory activities, how many times you're actually removing those thick gloves or removing that thick covering in order to expose your pure vibration. See, that's the one beautiful thing about always investing in an ancient art. Most ancient arts give an individual to see themselves and to show themselves in their purest form. You see, so drumming and dance and fighting and cooking and spirituality, divination, all of these different things constantly strip the glove. You got to take the glove off to enjoy them. You see, or they won't work. So it's like putting a bubble over yourself because you want to be protected from diseases, like the boy in a bubble, and then trying to dance with someone. Well, it's just going to be the bubbles touching. So you're not really able to have a real experience, so you have to strip the covering in order to have that pure experience. Well, what happens in that moment is that the mind is able to interact with life in a pure way. It opens you up. This is why a lot of times when I do Iboris for people, when I do those head cleansings, one of the warnings that you hear me always say, like, okay, for the next couple of days, don't get into any arguments. And if you can even be a bit isolated, it's even better. Why? Because your mind, your Inu, your Ori Inu, your inner consciousness is now open and exposed because I've thinned out your layer. And periodically you have to exfoliate some of those outer layers so that way you can continue the cultivation process of the mind. You see? So the cultivation is key. And I definitely hope you all understood everything that was being said in this segment. I broke it down in several different ways, but we're going to break it down some more so you can really understand the fineness and the coarseness of matter that makes up the quality of the vibrations that make up what we call consciousness. Okay. And this will hopefully or willfully give you a better understanding of why we speak about culture so much, why it's so important, and why every aspect of our life needs to be looked at for possible thought transference, or possible projection, or like I said, possible anecdotal activities or anecdotal projections that we put onto people, or if our everyday activities are constantly purifying us, Are we making sure that every day we're having some form of rain of knowledge that's opening us up and widening our scope of awareness? Or are we focused in thinking that the goal and the destination of all of this is a brawny intellect, without understanding that that's just a tool? It's like I've heard people, I say, what is your purpose in life? What do you want to do? And a lot of times my clients will say, man, I want to have a nice house, nice car. And trust me, I'm not against that. I'm all about tiptoeing on marble floors and, riding around in something foreign. I'm with that. I got you. But those are tools to do something else. Those are tools to reach the destination. Those should never be the destinations. Because you do that for 15, 20 years, and then someone like me comes along and starts teaching, just imagine how offended you'll be. Because underneath all of those layers of what you call history and intellect, there lies the kernel of what you started out to do. But you can't believe that it could possibly be deep down in there. That's why half the time when I ask people, what is your life purpose? I don't know. What are you good at? I don't know. What makes you special? I don't know. See all the layers of everyday activity that has blocked us. So we don't know how to be with each other. We don't know how to interact with one another because we've lost sight of what each other is in the continuum and the unified field that we call life. So we're not raising the quality of life because we're not raising the quality and the cultivation of self. Okay? So life evolves, but it evolves without us. Now just look in your community. Pay close attention as to if you're evolving and doing the next thing, or are you stuck? And pay attention to, in your personal culture, if that stagnation happened at around the same time where a dislocation of respect, protocols, and etiquette also happened. Because what do those things do? They humble you. What does humility do? It opens you up and makes you vulnerable for the mind to be cultivated and to grow and evolve. Without that, you stay like a cave person. All right. That has been our segment. And I want to say peace to everyone who participated in the men's call last Sunday. Again, reminder, every first Sunday at 1 p.m., we'll be doing the Anu Men's Call, and you have to at least be a member of the ministry for that call. We got a lot of emails, people saying, I want to get in on that. If you did not fill out the membership form, then you're not getting in on that. And the same thing for the Women's Call, which is every Monday at 8. I know I mess up that time sometimes. Monday at 8 o'clock, same thing. This is for ministry folk. Okay, this is for ministry folk. All right, which is nothing to do. But to join this, you got to understand that you're going to get rained down on with knowledge. And if you're not ready to get wet, then, stay dry and dusty where you're at. We'll still love you. I still love you. All right. So into such time, I want to thank you all for tuning in and listening. And if you're not a member of the Anu Spiritual Training Experience in the Sadulu House, join up. Take a class, take the training class, start learning, start growing, start getting where you need to be. We're coming to the end of the Gregorian year. And in January, like I said, we're going to be doing a Anu Spiritual Training Challenge. So this is an excellent time for you to get in and start now and start with a healthy cohort of people. Also, some of you may have noticed that there has been a redesign and change and the SaduluHouse.com website. We're in the process of enhancing it. Wait till you see. It's going to be really awesome. But what I did in the meantime was just simplified it so that way the classes can be utilized more easily on mobile browsers. Because I was finding that, because most people don't sit in front of computers anymore. And I was finding that because of the way that the site was structured before, using it on your phone was a little difficult. So it's real simple and basic looking now, but you can pull up your lessons much more easier on your phone, now than you could before. Oh, and you know what? Quick story. I wanted to clear up, no, not clear, but add to something that was said in one of the community shows where Sister Kim had brought up an incident. I don't think I shared it on the air. She said I did, though. I think I only shared it personally. But nonetheless, she was talking about a time, which was only a couple months ago, actually, where I was on the train in the city, and I saw someone I thought I knew, and they pulled a knife on me, right? And they were talking about just some of the initial disrespect that we show towards each other. But there were elements of that story that I think are significant. Okay, so real quick, I'm on a train, I'm coming uptown, and I saw someone on a train who I could have sworn I knew. Years ago, I actually owned an independent label. So, and record label, not that we sold records, but you get it. So I had an indie label for years with a few very successful artists. And attached to that label, I also owned a recording studio. So, and that was kind of how I, kept things afloat in between time, just an extra source of income. And also it was easier having your own studio because, then it was like now you got like people got these little bedroom studios and stuff. And because the ear of the listening audience has been dumbed down so much, especially you listening on cheap headphones, people can record stuff in their closets, in their bedrooms, and people will buy it. It's fine. But back then people would call for studio time. They wanted to go to a real studio, which of course I own. So this particular individual, and I'm speaking quickly, I want to try to get through this one, was a transvestite. Okay, so let me put the story out there. I'm gonna put it right there in the beginning. And one day he called, the studio line. He wanted some time. I actually happened to pick up the line, and he was like, I don't have a lot of money, but I got this project I want to do. And he sounded like a nice guy. Well, I thought it was a girl at the time on the phone, but I noticed the voice sounded a little weird. So I'm like, okay, well, whatever. So I said, listen, you seem like a nice person. Let's do this. You can come on one of the slower days, because I had interns in the studio. I said, one of my interns can engineer your session, because for the money he was working with, I was like, I got to pay my engineer, and then my costs have to be covered, so forth. But one of the interns can do it on one of the days that they come in to clean the consoles or realign the tape machine, because I had a 2-inch 24 track tape machine back then. All right, so cool, no problem. So we set it up. He comes through on a late night, because it was after another session, and so I'm like, oh, okay, that's what it is. All right, no problem, whatever. Just because one thing I'll say, regardless of how I may feel about certain things, when it comes to art, I feel everyone should have access to get their art off. I don't care who you are, what color you are, what age you are, sex, whatever. When it comes, because art is healing. We need our music. We need not just our music, but just our artistic expressions, our creative expressions, rather. So I didn't care about, him being a transvestite, even though he said he was transsexual, but I don't think he was a transsexual. I don't think he snipped anything or whatever. I think he was just dressed in woman's, but he had on stilettos and, the wig and everything. I remember like it was yesterday. So one of my interns there at the time, it was two of them. One was from the Ivory Coast, and the other one, he was from Jamaica. Young kid, actually, one from Jamaica, and they had a fit, and I had to pull them like literally outside. It was like, listen, relax with all that, everyone deserves their opportunity, and they're paying money, and you're getting, because I used to, even though they were interns, I used to pay my interns a little stipend. I was like, you're getting paid to do this, so just keep your mouth shut and do the music. So at the time, a track that I had just finished working on for a group was playing, and I was just kind of, making back then, tell you how long ago this was. I was making a CD. I was burning a CD of the song, before I left. And he was like, wow, man, I really like that song. Whatever. That's nice. I was like, thank you. I appreciate it. So he started singing to it, and he was killing it. Dressed like a girl, stilettos, wig, makeup, this, that, and the third, and had a voice like, had a real gruff and deep voice when he was actually, and it was like an amazing vocalist. So I was like, wow, this is interesting. So he actually sings like a guy, even though he's doing this other thing. So long story short, so I let him do a session. He did a song. He was extremely happy, very appreciative. And I ended up coming back. They were done, and the interns had to head out. They had to catch the last bus out. So I was like, all right, cool. I'll just get your copies for you here. And one thing I noticed, he was sweating like crazy. I'm like, man, you okay? Because it was cool in there. I'm like, it's not hot in here. You all right? You need some water or something? And he was like, no, you know what it is? I took some ecstasy before I came here. So I'm just like, out of it. I don't think I should have did that. So I'm like, I don't even know about any of that. So, long story short, he was just really expressing his gratitude for me, like looking out for him and really giving him professional, service. Like I didn't, even though it was an off-hour session, I didn't, skip on anything or whatever. And I think actually I ended up giving him a track or two, something like that. If I'm not mistaken, I ended up, because he came with a track that was actually, it was kind of whack. It was like a little house track, but it was whack. So I ended up giving him, I believe, like 2 tracks, or leasing him and saying, listen, you have to pay me, but you're not going to have exclusive rights, but you can use it for your demo. So he was like overjoyed, right? And so it turned into a like, so what are you doing after this? And I was like, no. And one of the things that I understand is that it's not always about the attraction when it comes to that. Sometimes, and he was a young kid, like he was probably, I don't think he was any older than 19, 20 years old, actually. But a lot of times what happens is when you're nice to individuals who are living that sex style, sometimes they get taken advantage of, or they've been taken advantage of in the past, or you got guys who secretly want to have a freakathon, so they use them for, I don't want to say sex, but masturbatory reasons. So, if they feel like, okay, this man is being nice to me, it means I have to provide a favor. And made it clear, I was like, no, it's all good. Like, hey, man, you got a great voice. And I'm talking to him and I keep saying like, hey, man, and I'm using certain language for a reason. Like, make it clear, like, it may make you uncomfortable, but this is how I'm going to communicate with you. All right. So long story short. So what happened was he actually started opening up to me, which tends to always happen about being in a life. And he had told me that he was actually prostituting at the time. And he used to go down to Hunts Point in the Bronx, and sometimes you go. A lot of you probably know that turn off on 125th Street in Harlem when you're getting on the Harlem River Drive. That little corner where you have all the trannies. It's usually like 3 or 4 trannies. So he said he used to go down there sometimes, or he went down to Hunts Point. So he's out there selling his booty, just to kind of to make it. So I was like, you need to get yourself a sugar daddy and get up off the streets and really just work on your music. So, he asked if he could stay in touch with me because, he was really encouraged by the conversation. And I think, if I remember, I'm trying to think back, someone had died recently, whether it was his grandmother, I think it was his grandmother, something like that, who he stayed with. So he was really depressed. So I was like, yeah, sure, you can reach out, but I'm kind of making it clear, like, I'm not into that, but on some big brother stuff, sure. We all need a big brother. So, I ended up, I think, dropping him off, if I'm not mistaken. I ended up dropping him off. He was, thank you. I think I dropped him off on the Blade, actually, if I remember. Now that I'm thinking back. Yeah, I think he went straight to the Stroll after the studio. He went right to the track and went and put that work in. But I might have dropped him off on the Blade. And so what happened was, so this is years ago. We're talking maybe 1999. Maybe 2000. Maybe 99, 2000. Around there somewhere, right? So I'm on the train just maybe a month or two ago, and I see who I thought was him sitting right across from me or right in front of me on the train. So I'm trying not to stare, and I'm like, that look, because the kid's name was Romeo. That wasn't his girl name. His girl name was Paris. But when I remember I think he said his name was Romeo, something like that, or Romero or something. A long time ago, I barely remember. But anyway, so I'm looking, I'm like, yo, this looks just like, even the same body, everything. So I said, okay, I remember where he lived. So if he gets off at these stops and this stop, then I know. And it was actually a stop I had to get off to make my transfer. So sure enough, got off with me. So I'm behind it on the steps, and I'm like, okay, behind is looking a little weird. Like it's not really there's no hips there really. Looks like there's some breasts, but that could be from some pills or something. I don't know. And it's been a long time, but still small, slim, everything. So we get to the top of the steps, and I said, excuse me. I said, do you sing? And he or she was like, what? Kind of like that. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not trying to talk to you. I said, you look like somebody I know. And I didn't want to say, you look like this transsexual, so I'm like, no. So I used the same thing. I was like, no, so I used to have somebody come to my studio years ago, and you look like this person, and I'm saying person, trying not to say him or her, because I don't know what the heck this is. See, and this is significant. I don't know if it's a guy, and I'm right up on it. So I'm going to say she, because I'm thinking it was a girl. And then she was like, no, I don't sing. I don't know. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So I'm like kind of just walking my own way, but still kind of looking like, is he lying? Like, is this really him? Maybe he's lying. But I'm like, all right, whatever. So he was like, or she was like, I'm just saying, I was like, no, but I'm not trying to talk to you. So, but, and on a side note, even if I was trying to talk to her, I look better than her. Like, she, that's part of the insanity too, is always is everybody thinks they're a superstar. Like, so, and I wasn't rude or anything, but so I was just like, yeah, all right, well, cool. And she was like, I'm just saying, I've been, oh my God, like every day I've been getting harassed. And I said, well, at least you could say today you didn't get harassed. And I said it nicely. But I did say, well, why are you getting harassed? Because I was thinking maybe then that she was going to say, well, because I'm a tranny. Then I would have known, like, okay, no, I could have brought it back. Like, I know you. But she was like, well, I guess because, I only date white men. And I guess people have an issue with me dating white men. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. So, all right, let me just kind of try to ease off. So I'm like talking, but my body language, I'm moving off to the side. I was like, well, to each their own. People a lot of times have their own opinions about things. I'm just kind of trying to close the conversation. And I was like, but like I said today, and I repeat, I was like, well, at least you could say today that, you were approached respectfully and no one said anything. At least I don't know what happened to you earlier or later, but, I'm not saying anything stupid to you. So then she's like, well, don't even worry about that. You don't even have to worry about that because I got something for that. And pulls out a box cutter out her back pocket and opens the blade. Right? So now I'm not moving away, because one of the things, when someone has a blade on you, you got two choices: move in closer or run. And like I told you guys before, I'm not built for speed. And this even when we was going up the steps, she was flying. So I'm like, all right, she would outrun me if she wanted to cut me. So I faced myself in a way so that I could kind of move in to that forearm if I wanted to get, and hit it and shock it and maybe knock the blade out. But I didn't move in like in a menacing way, like she didn't know what I was doing. So I was like, well, because I wasn't even phased by that. I was just, because I mean, I've been cut before. You're not going to, I done got over that already, you know? So I was like, well, you know, I don't even think you need that right now. But, you know, I understand what you're saying, you know, and I said, hey, a girl's got to protect herself. I understand clearly, you know, you do whatever you feel you need to do, you know, keep yourself safe. So she was like, yeah, because, you know, and still like going. And we're in a train station, so I'm not clearly hearing everything that's being said. You know, yeah, because, you know, and I'm like, yeah, I feel you. You know, I'm like, yeah. Not really hearing her, but just like, yeah, I feel you. You know, you gotta be safe because there's a lot of crazy people out here. And obviously I'm referring to her, you know. So one thing after another. And I think I might have even said at one point, like, you know, well, yeah, I know what it's like. You know, I've been cut before. Because I'm like, you touched me with that little box cutter. Like, let me not say, but you're not going to destroy me with a box cutter. Like, no, you're not going to get me with that. I've been cut up and stabbed too many times for me to be worried about you with your box, and you ain't even holding it right. So I'm not worried about you, you know? So it was funny because Toreen said on the show, he was like, she could have hurt Chief. And granted, yeah, she could have, you know what I mean? Cause it's still a blade, you know, you get a good shot off or whatever. Yeah, you might get me in it. And I think even that day I might have had like a t-shirt on, you know, cause it's a couple months ago, but it was a warm day, you know, so it's not like I had on a coat or anything like that where I could have, you know, maybe blocked or whatever. But, again, why is there a knife in my face when I'm like, we're not even there? So that's really what happened in that story. And I thought what was significant was that the fact that even when I walked away, I'm still like, was that a transvestite? You know, so those lines being blurred, I think are significant when we get to that point where we don't even know if we're talking to a male or a female. That's significant. And again, it wasn't anything against. I think it was a woman, you know, in hindsight, because just kind of the way the body was, you know, and plus she looked like her sneakers were corny, her jeans were a little dirty. A transvestite usually has more pride in their appearance than that, you know, and she didn't have any makeup on. You know, usually when you see them, they kind of done up a little bit, but, you know, and she might have had mental issues, or maybe somebody really did just mess with her and she just was not trying to have it. And again, her gross matter perception, you know, she had that association with her history and she couldn't see the finer or feel the finer and subtle energy that I was giving to her, which was very friendly. Like I made it a point, even when we got to the top of the steps, I created distance before I said, excuse me, do you sing? You know, cause I know I'm not the most friendliest looking person. I think I am, but then I'm always hearing something different. But, you know, we always have a different impression of ourselves than what we project out into the world, you know. So I know sometimes people see me, they get a little nervous and my voice doesn't sound really soft and friendly. So I'll do certain things sometimes to just kind of make people know, you know, or feel at ease, especially when you're in the New York City subway. You know, crazy things do happen. So I created some distance, and even like, you know, just my whole body language. It was very friendly. I didn't use my hands in talking to her. You know, I kept my hands like I might have been holding a bag or something, but lower, so that way she didn't have to see how my knuckles or anything. You know, I know little subtle things to do with my physiognomy to really decrease any threats of aggression. But that was what happened with that story. And I know Sister Kim had told her she went over it, but I felt the fact that I thought it was a transsexual was a finer point, or transvestite was a finer point when we're speaking about how we're approaching each other in the initial disrespect. And sometimes those individuals who may behave like that, like if you can't tell the difference between them and a male, that may say something about the type of individuals perpetuating that type of disrespect, because it's not all black people who are disrespecting all black people, if you want to use the term black. You know, there were certain environments and certain types of people where that is their immediate response, that level of hostility, you know. So, yeah, I just wanted to share that. That was our addendum 20-minute story, but you got the message, the bulk of it. All right. So until next time, this has been Chief with Chief Speaks. Everyone be safe, be safe, and be well. And I'll see you on our next segment.